Freedom Radio Hour. Live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Freedom Radio Hour. I'm your host, DJ Adam Cruz, and I'm sitting here next to my fantastic co-host,
Eddie Nicholas. What up, beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, the Freedom Radio Hour, y'all. Mixtapesessions.com.
Yeah.
What up, sir, and what are we into today?
Well, first of all, I'm so happy to see you.
Oh, likewise.
Thanks for taking the time. Let's take a moment to let our viewers and our listeners know that the Freedom Radio Hour is here, not only giving you fantastic music, but we're here to be your number one source for music business news and trends from around the globe. Thank you so much for taking the time to like, share, and comment on all the stuff that we're posting. Check out our YouTube channel and our website at freedomradiohour.com. All right, we need to jump in front. I noticed you have something in your hands for people that can't see and that are listening.
Oh,
what do you got up here?
I have one of my all-time favorite artists, Miss Thelma Houston.
Ah, what's this that you're holding?
I'm holding her Any Way You Like It LP, but I love this album for the mere fact that it has Don't Leave Me This Way on it.
Oh, that's a classic.
You know, Teddy Pendergrass did it, she did it. A couple of other folks did it. Another song she did was Don't Make Me Pay for Another Girl's Mistake, talking about love, life, and living. All these little storytellers. That's what albums used to tell. Albums used to tell stories.
Yes. Well, I love that you're holding this. For those that can't see it, Eddie's holding a vinyl out here, and I love vinyl for a lot of reasons. Why do you love vinyl?
Well, it really makes me no difference because
I love it.
Because I've moved into an age now where when we once had vinyl, because I used to be a vinyl collector.
Right.
Until you had to find out where to store it, how to store it, how long to keep it, and to keep it in good condition.
Right.
So sadly, I relinquished my record collections except for a pocket full of treasures.
I was going to say, do you have narrow or hide?
I have some treasures.
You have a few. Okay.
Treasures.
But yeah, so you can't normally see this on camera, but to our left, I have a shelf of all this vinyl because I love to still collect from time to time, but like Eddie, I basically have pared it down to my few. So anyway, we're holding this for a reason, I think. I love vinyl for the liner notes. I love to read liner notes. There's a credit to tell you who produced it, the year it came out, all that stuff. I'm kind of geeky like that. So, and I love the inside sleeves because there's a lot of design. A person like me who graphic design, I pay attention to all that stuff. But I want to talk about what's up with vinyl these days in America. I don't know what's going on in the wonderful land of Sudan, but here in the States, we have noticed that reporting has come out that's indicated for the first time that vinyl sales has surpassed CD sales. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had this huge light bulb moment. I'll explain what I mean. In essence, what we're seeing is CDs starting to fade away. And vinyl continuing its chipping with that little engine that over the years has enjoyed. They're saying it's going to have 224 million in sales already for the first half of the year, and by the end of the year, it's projected to bring in $500 million. That's a tiny little. That's about 4% of the music consumed in the States, but it's in the world. Excuse me, but it's a good little. That's a good little amount for the States. I think it's certainly not an indicator that it's on the way to extinction, which for years that's what was going on. But that's not the big story. The big story here is that streaming has taken an interesting turn that I want to talk about in relationship to vinyl.
Okay.
So, Billboard, Billboard is the charting company. So if you want to be a number one Billboard artist, like us artists, we would love to be. We actually are friends with number one dance artists, aren't we?
Yes, a number of them.
Yes, a number of them. So we pay attention to the charts because we understand that for years, Billboard has been the
indicator.
Yeah, the indicator of how things are going. And how do they track that? They track it through Neilson. Remember, Neilson is that like at the retail store or the barcode that's attached to the physical product. Like here on this vinyl in the back, there's a little barcode somewhere, or on the CD, in the back of it, there's a barcode that goes boop, and it subtracts it. And so we talked in prior episodes about direct sales and how it was easy to track. So that was 1 million sold of that barcode scan meant platinum, and so et cetera, et cetera. But now with digital music, you had Neilson, the tracking company, had to switch up. You know, Neilson's been doing this stuff since 1923.
Yes.
But Billboard and Neilson started their bromance, as I like to call it, in 1991. So since that time, Billboard has been using the Neilson scans to say, okay, this is the #1 artist, #2, etc., right? And then when digital music came on, Neilson started to track that. Billboard used that as well. And that was still that 1-to-1. Each time somebody downloaded something, they treated it as one, right? And then you had streaming that came around that's flipped everything upside down, because now they couldn't just treat 1 million streams of a song the same way that they treated a physical vinyl like this or a CD, etc. So now you had somebody in somebody's conference room decided that it was going to be a fraction of one. And that changed that dynamic. And if you want more details about that, I wrote about it in my book, Free the Music, Tips and Tales from an Indie Music Nerd. That's my shameless plug for this episode.
And nothing wrong with a shameless plug.
So anyway, I talk about that because they've just announced that Valence Media, the company that owns Billboard, they just up and bought Neilson. So for the first time, you have the charting company Billboard under the same umbrella as the tracking mechanism, Neilson. And I know that your head's already spinning, and I want to get your thoughts about that. But I have 3 takeaways I think it's important to know. Let's take a break on the Freedom Radio Hour. We'll come back and talk more of this music business news right here, Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
The Heartbeat of Sudan. Freedom Radio Hour, y'all. Mixtapesessions.com, 91.6 FM.
From author and music industry leader Adam Cruz, check out the new book, Free the Music Business, Tips and Tales from an Indie Music Nerd. Available now on paperback, Kindle, audiobook, and soundtrack, courtesy of Mixtape Sessions.
Freedom Radio Hour. Live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
What up, beautiful people, and welcome back. 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan. Mixtapesessions.com. Freedom Radio Hour, y'all. I'm Eddie Nicholas, and we are back. I'm here with my good, knowledgeable, as I always say. He knows it all because he studied. Yeah, the one and only Mr.
Adam Cruz. You're live and direct right here on the Freedom Radio Hour, your #1 source for music business news and trends from around the globe. Thanks for joining us. All right, let's jump right back into it. We're talking about how Valence Media, the company that owns Billboard, you know, the charting company in the U.S. and around the globe, they also up and bought Neilson, the company that tracks sales in music. So I have my 3 takeaways, but I want to get your feeling when you hear about this news, because on this show we always talk about the consolidation of power, right? There used to be a bunch of major labels, now there's 3, Sony, UMG, and Warner Music. So knowing that, what do you think about this news?
It just sounds like another, the big fish eating up the little fish. But in this case, they were prior bedfellows, and now they are definitely bedfellows. And I just always see when you have these companies like Valencia buying up
Valence.
like Valence or whoever, Valencia, Valence, potatoes, it always comes to something where you have these megalithic companies that want to eat up and gobble up. It just sounds like with that being done, they can fix their charting.
Right. Okay, yeah, so I totally, because you know what? My side eye was definitely up there when I heard about this news, but then I had a chance to marinate over it. Oftentimes, you may not know this out there, but Eddie doesn't always get a briefing of the episode. Sometimes he does, but sometimes I purposely don't tell him because I like to get his visceral reaction. And when I used to tell him, he would give all that reaction off camera, so I needed to have that on camera, Anyway, my 3 takeaways are this. Just like you alluded to, just like you saw a consolidation of power in terms of the record labels, you're now seeing a consolidation of power where the company that charts your music is now owned by the same company that tracks your music. And of course, the side eye, we already talked about why that's relevant here, because you're like, okay, now you can fix the numbers, crunch numbers the way that you see fit in order to appease your advertisers, stakeholders, etc. Right? Okay. My 3 takeaways are the following. That is number 1. Number 2 is I feel a little bit more hopeful than you. You know why? Because I feel like up until now, Billboard relied on Neilson's publicized data to then Neilson took that data, and that's what, Billboard took that data and did their thing with it. But I think now that they have access to the internal tracking mechanisms, I think you'll see more accurate charting. Because now they're not relying on
a more accurate charting geared towards whom?
Well, because we know, like, in general, the music industry is notoriously not transparent. Right.
And they're still not transparent.
But I think
because
they own by the same folks, so now they have access to that internal data that they didn't have access to before. Before they had to rely on whatever the company publicized, meaning whatever Neilson said, okay, Eddie Nicholas sold 1 million, then Billboard took that and tracked that.
And that's what they still need to be doing.
Yes, but I think now that they have the internal access, they can do 2 things. One, they can have more accurate reporting.
Or they can manipulate.
Well, that's your other side of the coin.
There's always going to, I understand what you're saying, but at the same token, these companies are known for manipulating numbers. And how is it going to be fair for all those other entities that come under Neilson it's not probably going to be called Neilson anyway, that are in competition with, with that very, very poll taking or something like that. So that's my concern when it comes to that. Will it be profitable for some? Of course it will, because again, you got stakeholders, shareholders, and whoever else is part of all of that, because it's still, the underlying thing is still about money.
Yeah, okay. So let me say my piece of it. No, well, my second was I was feeling more hopeful than you, because I feel like they could also innovate in terms of creating charts that we haven't thought about before. I mean, just off the top of my head, there's times where you're streaming content that you don't listen to all the way. There's a large swath of the population that does that what we call partial listens or partial streaming. And I would see how Billboard and Neilson can work together to use that information as well as sentiment tracking. You know what that is? That's not tracking chart of sales. That's tracking what people say about your record. So imagine you had the ability to have access, if you were, say, Billboard or Neilson, have the ability to work together and innovate around sentiment tracking. Now you're getting real accurate tracking of what people say about the songs, not just if they bought it or not. That's very binary to me. I think this adds layers of innovation. And I also, I think that's something to consider.
But again, you keep saying, but if they're owning, where's the word partnership?
Well, they're owned by the same company. In other words, they're like, imagine if you're in a hall space or in an office space. Now you go down the hall and you can work with Neilson. Before, you had to rely on what they publicized to you. If you're Billboard, I think this is a good look. But I'll tell you what, my number 1 biggest takeaway, because I said there were 3, right? My number 1 biggest takeaway is, I didn't mean to bury the lead, but for the first time, reporting has indicated that the 80% of the music consumed in the U.S. is streaming. 80%.
For the quickness of it.
And that means that it's shrinking any other kinds. Even when we bring it back to the vinyl and streaming are the 2 things that tend to remain. I'll break down what I mean next time. Let's take a break right here. Where?
91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan. Freedom Radio Hour, y'all.
Yep.
Mixtapesessions.com.
Come back with me.
From author and music industry leader Adam Cruz, check out the new book, Free the Music Business, Tips and Tales from an Indie Music Nerd. Available now on paperback, Kindle, audiobook and soundtrack, courtesy of Mixtape Sessions.
Freedom Radio Hour.
And we're back live on Capital Radio, 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan. You're deep in the zone right here on the Freedom Radio Hour, your number one source of music business news and trends from around the globe. I'm your host, DJ Adam Cruz, and I'm with my fantastic co-host,
Eddie Nicholas, and welcome back, 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, Freedom Radio Hour, y'all, and mixtapesessions.com. Let's jump right back into it.
So we're talking about the implications around the music game these days. The last bit about this Billboard Neilson talk we were discussing is that the big headline is that streaming music is accounting for 80% of the total music consumed in the U.S. in the first half of the year. So what's the point of that? We're finally in the midst of a level of permanence, I argue, on the one side. You've seen for the first time that CDs are dwindling away. Why is that? Because remember, CD was supposed to be our step towards perfection. Remember, CD was supposed to sound real crystal clear, perfect. Everything was going to be sharp and crisp. Vinyl, on the other hand, was crunchier, analog, all this kind of stuff. Now with streaming in there, I think it's what you're going to see is CDs started to fade away to total extinction, whereas vinyl and streaming will be here to stay. Vinyl's been around for decades, and if it hasn't died by now, it's not going to.
It's not going to.
Now streaming, by virtue of this latest news that it's now 80% of the market, that tells me that that is a sign of permanence. Now over the future, who knows? Why do we say that? Because when you think about companies like Spotify and Amazon and all that, they're trying to take over the world. They want to get over in these other countries. You know, Spotify has ins in 79 countries. Amazon has ins in 36 countries, not just under 40. And the big leader of the pack, Apple. Apple has ins in 110 countries. What do I mean? That means that the service is available in 110 countries. Now, when you add that in terms of the market caps and how much you're taking up in the marketplace, that's a good amount of money.
And in those huge markets.
But the interesting thing, man, we talked about a big problem that Spotify has. It's not Spotify had big problems when they launched in India recently because they didn't have one of the three big record labels, Warner Music, behind them. And they also have a big problem because their service is not available in China.
Which is another market of billions of people. Which a whole bunch of folks.
That's number 4. That's number 4, right? We said it was Apple, Amazon, and what was that third one I just had? It was Apple. Spotify, Apple, and Amazon were the top 3. Our 4 on the list is a company we call Tencent Holdings. They're based out of China. We talked about them before. They have ends in not only China, but in Africa. And so...
But Tencent, not here in the States, though.
No.
And they don't need.
So Tencent Holdings has a market capitalization of around $22 billion. Woo! That represents about 8% of global total music consumption. You know how much that is?
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. So it's interesting that the other little T is that it was just announced that the head of Apple, Tim Cook, he just accepted a professorship and a role in one of their boards for a university in China. Right. What do you think's happening? I mean, come on! It feels like it's so obvious if you pay attention that
all these fabulous bedfellows.
Yes, that it looks like Apple. I'm saying this. I don't have authority, but when you put it together, you can't help but at least ponder the following. Apple is trying to take a big bite out of the competition by getting into bed with China. And so they'll get the backing of the Chinese government because, you know, Chinese government and their universities are very intertwined.
Yes.
So by Tim Cook being aligned with their educational system in China, I argue that gives him an advantage in keeping his costs down for manufacturing the devices that he's trying to sell.
Because he's right there.
And he doesn't have Spotify or Amazon to deal with because he's down with Tencent Holdings at that point.
At that point.
So I just think that there's so much here that we could chomp at and we could keep going. But I think what you do is it's like an onion, right? You peel the layers back. But I think it's important for you to know as an artist what's happening with the music game all around you and what they're doing with the music that we put out. What they're doing to make billions and billions of dollars, and then to consolidate, they buy up another company, who buys up another company, etc. It's worth noting that back to the Billboard and Neilson story, that Valence Media also not only has Billboard and Neilson, they also have the Golden Globes, House of Cards. So they're into the video scene as well.
Mm-hmm. And had their fingers in stretching out in a whole bunch of stuff. As Adam and I always say, if you can, buy some shares of these companies, or most importantly, find a way to sit yourself at the table, because decisions are consistently being made in regards to the music that we all create.
Yeah.
And as the creatives, we're often taken out of those processes when it comes to the divvying and how much your art is worth. So if you can, buy some shares, have a voice at the table.
Yep. And I think it's important to stay well informed. I mean, right now, it's important to note that Wall Street has a very kind of precarious relationship with streaming services, because they feel like the relationship is so contingent upon these labels. So just in that story I talked about earlier with Spotify having trouble launching in India without Warner Music, that's what Wall Street analysts look at and say, okay, the stock value is going to fluctuate because this is not based on cement. It could fold like a house of cards because one or two or three of them get together and say, we're not signing up. And now the value shrinks because from one day to the next, due to a relational problem, the stocks implode. And it's not like under other industries. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much for tuning in to the Freedom Radio Hour. Make it your business to download or stream the brand new single from Mr. Eddie Nicholas entitled Revolution, as well as his debut album entitled Do You Want to Dance, available everywhere to stream and download. Also, check out my music at DJ Adam Cruz. I mentioned my book, Free the Music, Tips and Tales from an Indie Music Nerd, and I also have albums. Check out the Freedom LP out now. All right. I love how he does that. For those that are listening, he's pointing out all of the records in the background.
My Vanna White.
Yes. Have a great weekend and a great week ahead. I'll see you next time.
91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan. Eddie Nicholas, Adam Cruz, mixtapesessions.com, y'all.
Yep. Shout out to Johnny D and the Johnny D Experience, y'all.
Peace and love.